Hello, I'm Casey.
And I'm Fallon.
And this is
Render the Darkness.
So your fact for this episode is sliced bread was first manufactured by machine and sold in the 1920s by Silikoff Baking Company in Missouri. It was the greatest thing since unsliced bread.
That was pretty good. I wonder what they would consider, like before sliced bread, since they say that a lot. It's the best thing since sliced bread, what they used until that. Like, it was the best thing since
fire.
Okay. Sounds good.
That's hot. Not sponsored. Nobody come at me. Hilton's.
Oh. I was like...
I could see your confusion. So. Also not sponsored.
Still confused. Okay. Alright, so... in part 2, we talked about the 408 cipher and the attack at Lake Berryessa. And this is part 3 of the Zodiac Killer. This episode, we are going to talk about the murder that is widely known as the last murder committed by the Zodiac. We will also talk more about some of the letters he sends in the 304 and 148 cipher. Just to warn you, there is a little bit of jumping back and forth on some of the dates. Sorry, 340 and 148 ciphers. Sometimes I read numbers incorrectly. Okay, so Paul Stine was born on December 18th, 1939 in Exeter, Tulare County, California. His dad's name was Theodore Milford Teddy Stine, who was born on December 6, 1904 in Fayetteville, Washington County, Arkansas. His mother's name was Audra Thelma Busby Harrison, who was born on March 19th, 1912. He had a brother named Joe Charles Stine, who was born on June 10th, 1935 in Oklahoma. And he had one sister named Geneva Ann Stein Marriott, who was born on December 10th, 1941 in California. He married Claudia Westcott on May 27th, 1967, and she had her bachelor's in arts from UW-Madison, and she had a master's in secondary education from the San Francisco State College. Now, Paul was a part-time insurance agent who was working towards getting his PhD in English while he worked as a taxi cab driver during the night shift, starting at 9 p.m. and ending at 5 a.m., so he could continue to go to college. On October 11th, 1969, Paul was going to work like any other day at the Yellow Cab Company at 8:45 p.m. He took his first customer from Pier 64, which was close to the Agua Visa Park, and drove them to the San Francisco terminal, about 9.7 miles south. They say that the route he more than likely took after dropping them off was U.S. Route 101, that would take him back to the intersection of Mason and Greary, where he thought he would pick up a random fare. Now, the assistant traffic manager of the Yellow Cab Company, Leroy Sweets, radioed Paul to tell him of a pickup of a regular customer at 509th Avenue on the west side of San Francisco. And that, unfortunately, would be the last time he would speak to Paul, because a few minutes later, his body would be found lying across the passenger seat of his cab that was close to the Washington and Cherry intersection.
That's terrible.
Now, Paul had entered Washington and Maple as his customer's destination on his trip sheet, but Paul had actually went a few yards away from the Washington and Cherry intersection at 9:55 p.m., which was next to the 3898 Washington Street home that was in a pretty well-off district of Presidio Heights, and that is where his customer pulled out a 9mm gun and shot Paul in the right side of his head, killing him instantly. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Now, the officers that responded to the call were Armand Pelicetti and Frank Petta, who would later on see that the meter in the cab read $6.25 at 10:46 p.m. Now, that information allowed them to retrace the trip, and they were able to tell that Paul had picked up this customer somewhere around Mason and Geary intersection around Union Square, and that information also verified Leroy Sweet's statement. Armand seen 3 teenagers when he got out of his car at the crime scene, and he had them go back across the street to their home. He then went to inspect the taxi, and he found Paul lying on the passenger seat with his head on the passenger floor. Now, across the street, the 3 teenagers had seen what had happened to Paul. They watched the Zodiac remove a piece of his shirt and watched as he wiped down the inside of the cab. When he got out of the taxi, he proceeded to wipe down the outside of the right passenger door and the handles of the driver's side door. After seeing all this, they called the police at 9:58 p.m. However, somehow there was a miscommunication by the dispatcher about the events that took place, and mistakenly, they told the police to be on the lookout for an African-American man. Now, because of this incorrect information, the Zodiac was able to escape and make his way down to Jackson Street, about a block from the scene. Now, the teens were able to see the man pretty good from their location that was about 50 to 60 feet away. So the accurate description that they gave was, quote, WMA, which stands for white male adult in his early 40s, 5'8", heavy build, reddish blonde, crew cut hair, wearing eyeglasses, dark brown trousers, dark navy blue or black parka jacket, dark shoes. Now again, because of the incorrect information given to the officers, Donald Falk and Eric Zelms, hopefully I said that correctly, who originally thought that they were responding to a robbery and or an assault of a taxicab driver, seen a heavy-set white man wearing a navy blue jacket that was just above the knee with a stretchy type waist, rust or brown-colored creased pants, and tan engineer boots that was 5 foot 10 inches tall, 35 to 45 years old, and looked to weigh around 180 to 200 pounds. He was by the intersection of Jackson and Maple Street, but they didn't think any of it and continued their search for the suspect. Now, there is another version of the events that happened. Donald Falk remembered the man going into a stairwell that was thought to be 3712 Jackson Street. However, in the documentary, This is the Zodiac Speaking, that contradicted what he had said on November 12, 1969 in a report. He stated, I respectfully wish to report the following. That responding to the area of Cherry and Washington Streets, a suspect fitting the description of the Zodiac Killer was observed by Officer Falk walking into an easterly direction on Jackson Street and then turned north on Maple Street. Now, Donald would say that when he walked up to the man on Jackson Street, he wasn't really suspicious of him because of the falsely given information from the dispatcher. So he continued to go to the crime scene, and that is when they were flagged down by Armand. In the documentary, Donald remembered that, quote, he stopped us and said that he was looking for the white male that had just gone down the street. There was a little conversation about the initial description, what it was, and he said, no, he was a white male. I then used a slang term and said, oh, that was a suspect. In another documentary called Crimes of the Century, he did state something different about where they were and where they had last seen the Zodiac. He stated, quote, we proceeded on Jackson Street towards Arguello, continuing our search. As we arrived at Arguello Street, the description of the suspect was changed to a white male adult, and believing the suspect was possibly the one involved in the shooting, we entered the Presidio of San Francisco and conducted a search on West Pacific Avenue, the opposite side of the wall, and the last direction we observed the suspect going. We did not find the suspect. Now, in the documentary, This is the Zodiac Speaking, Armand went back to the teenagers after he found Paul in the taxi, and they gave him the description of the man again. He said, quote, it was then I was told it was a white male. I couldn't get to the radio fast enough at that point to let everybody else know. The kids had told me whoever had done this crime had left the cab, went out the door and seemed to be wiping the cab down and reaching into the cab and ambulating or walking down Cherry Street in a northerly direction, kind of towards the Presidio. I walked that way myself. I did not run because there was innumerable... I completely messed that. Sorry. Innumerable. Clothes and parked cars. Sorry. So I went down following every technique I knew so I didn't get my head blown off. What?
You said a clothes.
Instead of what?
Alcoves.
Alcoves. Sorry. Okay, so Inspector Dave Toshi and Bill Armstrong went to the scene and started a manhunt to search the roads around Presidio Park as well as the park itself. They brought 7 search dogs with them and had some set up by the Julius Kahn Playground and the Allegro Boulevard. There was an article on October 12, 1969 from the San Francisco Chronicle called Cabby Slain in Presidio Heights that talks about a man being seen going into the playground, and the book called Zodiac by Robert Graysmith that tells of a sighting of a man running to the playground. Now this is from the book, and it says, the detectives heard from neighbors that a stocky figure was seen dashing across Julius Kahn Playground and into the dense undergrowth of the Presidio. The dog patrol unit, 7 of the best search dogs in the country, gathered at the front entrance of the Presidio and were deployed one at a time in various directions. Armstrong and Toshi considered the possibilities. Had the killer gone quickly through the dark woods and emerged from the Presidio at Richardson Avenue and taken Highway 101 past Fort Point onto the Golden Gate Bridge and vanished into Marion County? So now, when evidence was collected from the crime scene, they actually found fingerprints on different parts of the taxi that included the door handles.
Okay.
They also found bloody prints between the driver door and the passenger door. Now, if you remember, the teenagers saw the man wipe them down before leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking that maybe he was in so much of a hurry to leave that maybe he missed it.
Mm-hmm.
So as more evidence was being collected throughout the case, with some of it being handwriting analysis, which shows that the Zodiac was right-handed, which is consistent to how Paul was shot on the right side from the back of the taxi. Now, the 3 teenagers worked with the police sketch artist to come up with a composite of the attacker, but they didn't think that it was very accurate because they made him look so young, so they did an amended one, and it was released on October 18th to the public. Now, on October 13th, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle received a letter from the Zodiac. And the letter was the piece of a shirt that he had cut off of Paul's shirt, which was proof that he was the one involved in the murder. He also added a threat towards school kids. He stated that, quote, I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning, just shooting out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out.
So when they were at the crime scene for Paul or whatever, they didn't notice a piece of his shirt had been taken?
Yeah, I think they did notice it. It just wasn't really in a lot of the resources that I've seen that they said anything about it being missing. But
well, it's awful coincidental that he took a piece of his shirt and to mail back or whatever, but then the kids say that they saw him using a piece of his shirt to wipe down the material. Is it possible that he was using a piece of Paul's shirt to wipe down the material?
it's possible.
And maybe the kids misseen what was happening?
Yeah, it's very possible that he was using his shirt to do that. Now, people started to get really scared, and they didn't want to act like the threats weren't serious. Because Zodiac has definitely shown that he has no problem with taking the lives of others, so the police deployed armed guards, started tracking school buses, and had more surveillance in the surrounding areas. On October 22nd, 1969, an article was published that talked about someone calling the Palo Alto Times and said that they were the Zodiac. And he had also said that he planned to, quote, pick the kids off as they got on the school bus. Now, after the threat, the district transportation supervisor said that they may have an armed guard ride on each of the 25 buses. The Palo Alto police chief, William Heide, said that the newest warning was, quote, extremely serious, but did recommend not to overreact in case it was a prank call. And this call was made either on or not too long before October 15th, 1969.
I'm not sure you can overreact to a call like that.
Yeah, I guess.
You would kind of want the person to know, like, hey, there are people watching for you. That way they don't be brave and see if they can get a shot in or whatever.
Right.
Like, I'm not sure you can make too big of a fuss.
No, I wouldn't say that you would. Now, the San Francisco Chronicle published an article on October 21st, 1969, saying that the district transportation director, Fred Soash, was responsible for the well-being of the school children. Now, in that article, it said that he had first learned of the threat last Wednesday, and he started to dedicate around 18 to 20 hours a day to stop it. So because the article was published on the 21st, Fred had to have received that phone call at least on the 15th, if not before that. Now, it's believed that the San Francisco Chronicle left out that message about the school bus to keep people from panicking. So they're saying that this could mean that the caller on the 15th made the school bus threat before the threat come out in the papers. This would mean that the caller who claims to be the Zodiac on the 15th, in fact, is the Zodiac, because he made the threats on the school kids before the public was made aware of the Stein letter. So now this is a Stein letter. The Stein letter reads as follows. This is the Zodiac speaking. I am the murderer of a taxi driver over by Washington Street plus Maple Street last night. To prove this, here is a blood-stained piece of his shirt. I'm the same man who did in the people in the North Bay area. The SF police could have caught me last night if they had searched the park properly, instead of holding road races with their motorcycles, seeing who could make the most noise. The car drivers should have just parked their cars and sat there quietly waiting for me to come out of cover. School children, okay, this is going to get a little, it's got to do with kids again. School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire plus, then pick them off, the kiddies, as they come out bouncing. Keep saying it incorrectly. I have to redo that. Then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. Now, the Oakland police received a call on October 22nd, 1969, when the caller saying he was a Zodiac. He wanted one of the distinguished lawyers, either Melvin Belli or Francis Lee Bailey, to go on a talk show that was hosted by Jim Dunbar. And he wanted them to be on that show later that day. Now, Melvin Belli would be the one to agree to go on the show, and he would actually talk to a man who said that his name was Sam, but he also said that he was the Zodiac. Now, there are 5 people who have actually heard the Zodiac's voice before, some who were police dispatchers. Nancy Slover, who took the Blue Rock Spring Park attack in Vallejo, Dave Slate, who took the Lake Berryessa call, Shirley Seary and Sergeant Robert Ringstore on December 19th, and Brian Hartnell, who survived his attack in Napa County. Now, Hartnell, Slover, and Slate all agreed that Sam didn't have the same voice they remembered hearing, so they do not believe that he was a Zodiac. Now, someone claimed to be the Zodiac, called the Belli household, and talked to the housekeeper and asked to speak to the lawyer, but she told him that he had left the country. The person on the phone said that, quote, I can't wait, today's my birthday. And this call was detailed in an FBI file that has some parts of it redacted on January 14th, 1970. Now, the person who called the talk show was identified by the San Francisco police on February 18th, 1970 as Eric Weil, who they claimed may have had some kind of mental illness. They are positive that he was responsible for that call and the call made to the Belli house because his birthday is on January 10th, 1940, and his dad's name was Sam. They also think this call was made on January 10th because he stated it was his birthday and couldn't wait. Now, they also believe that Eric thought with being honest about his birthday, it wouldn't lead to him, which that part was true, but the FBI did trace the calls to him. Now, there was another article by the Desert Sun published on October 23rd, 1969, which talked about the conversation the supposed Zodiac and Melvin Belli had. Now, Belli would go on to tell the caller that, quote, all of San Francisco want to help you. You can feel the hands out. Now, Paul Stein's brother, who is a 34-year-old, 165-pound Army and Air Force veteran, made a challenge to the Zodiac by giving him information about where he would be all day when he was out. And he said, quote, come and get me. I don't carry weapons. I don't feel I need any. I was very close to Paul, and now I want a chance at his killer. In the same article, the caller said that he had headaches all the time and, quote, had to kill. Now, in another article from the Desert Sun on October 22nd, talked about how the caller called the police at 2 a.m., wanting to reach either Belli or Bailey, as mentioned earlier. The caller called the talk show around 7 a.m. and said he was a Zodiac and hung up. Now, he would continue to call and hang up at around 12 times. The caller at some point during the show agreed to find out if the prosecutors would be able to promise that if he surrendered, then they wouldn't ask for the death penalty. And Belli also said that in another call that was off film, the Zodiac agreed to meet in a private location, but he never did show up. Now, there was an interview with the alleged Zodiac, which was recorded, but the monitor that was on the Zodiac's end messed up, so didn't record anything that he had said.
Of course not.
Now, you can find the interview with just Dunbar's side of the conversation on ZodiacCipher.com. But it's crazy that just...
So at no point, even if I get that the mic on his side messed up or whatever, but at no point did anybody call the police to say, hey, we're going to be interviewing this guy, trace the call and go get the guy. They could have just kept asking him questions long enough for the cops to go raid the house that the call was coming from, or location the house that the call was coming from, and go get the dude.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't try to trace it, or maybe they did and it just didn't work, or... I don't know.
That seems like a pretty opportune time to go get the guy.
Yeah, I don't know if it has something to do with, like, the recording device. I really don't know. It's definitely interesting. Okay, so now let's talk about Daniel Williams. Daniel Williams was 24 years old and was a school teacher in Richmond who lived at 1234 Bush Street in Martinez, California. Now, he has been having someone creep around his property, and that person would eventually start to make phone calls starting on October 23rd up to November 2nd. On November 2nd, the police were called to Daniel's home when he seen that his screen door had been pried open. Now, the police left shortly after because there was nothing stolen. But someone had gone into his home and actually laced his 7-Up with enough arsenic to kill someone.
Oh my goodness.
Now, fortunately, because he noticed the metallic taste, he didn't swallow it. Now, the person that was creeping around his home and calling with threats to murder Daniel claimed to be the Zodiac. Now, whether or not it really was a Zodiac, that person wanted Daniel dead. On November 5th, the Martinez police received a call from someone who said, quote, "There's going to be a shooting at 1234 Bush Street," then hung up. Now, the same person would call Daniel again and said, quote, "Had got to a Martinez school to search for victims, but left when he found police there." Now, this was a cause for concern because of the threats made in October about the school buses. Now, the attack on Daniel looked to align with the first paragraph in the November 9th letter where he said he was going to challenge the way that he had killed. Now, in this letter, he was speaking to the police by saying, quote, "I have grown rather angry with the police for their telling lies about me. So I shall change the way the collecting of slaves. I shall no longer announce to anyone. When I commit my murders, they shall look like routine robberies, killings of anger, plus a few fake accidents, etc." Now, Zodiac may be linked to Daniel's attack because of what is said next in that letter. The person that called him said that he was prevented from doing what he planned at the Martinez school, but they wouldn't be able to catch him because he stated, quote, "I'm too smart for them." That line in the letter that they were talking about him says, quote, "The police shall never catch me because I have been too clever for them." So it's said that because the sayings are so similar, that Daniel's attacker could have been the Zodiac, but if it was someone who was portraying the Zodiac, he was ready to kill to prove it. So
It's like you would love to argue with the dude and be like, no, you really weren't that smart. Or, say something like that about the guy or whatever, but they never caught him. So
yeah, that's true.
I mean, there's not a whole lot of other cases out there where, somebody is so bold and blatant and, even at some points tells them what he's going to do before he does it.
Yeah.
And they still don't catch this dude.
Yeah.
Like, he clearly wants to be caught.
Well, he either wants to be caught or he's just wanting the recognition for doing these things.
Well, I know, but you could tell that he kind of wants to be caught because, there's points where he even says, like, I'm getting frustrated with the cops because if you had been paying attention to the crime scene instead of doing whatever you were doing, you would have caught me.
Yeah.
So, like, he obviously didn't flee from that scene immediately. He obviously stuck around, probably to see if the cops were going to do their job and catch him. You know, there are some of these killers out there who realize that it's a sickness and realize it's something they can't control, and they do want to be stopped.
Yeah,
but they're
that's true.
scared to turn themselves in, so they want to be caught. And, you know, it's an opportunity to also get somewhat of that adrenaline out by making a game out of it.
Yeah. That's true.
But them making a game out of it doesn't mean they don't want to be caught. It just means they're waiting to be caught.
Right. That's true.
And as long as they're not getting caught in their minds, they're winning the game.
Right. And he does say something a little bit later on in here that kind of aligns with what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's where we're going to talk about the 340 cipher that had 63 characters and the dripping pen card. Now, the San Francisco Chronicle received the 340 cipher along with the dripping pen card on November 8th, 1969. And the card reads as follows. This is the Zodiac speaking. I thought you would need a good laugh before you hear the bad news. You won't get the news for a while yet. P.S. Could you print this new cipher in your front page? I get awfully lonely when I'm ignored. So lonely I could do my thing. Des, July, August, September, October, 7. Now, 51 years after receiving the cipher, Dave Oranchak from the United States, Sam Blake from Australia, and Jarl Van Eyck cracked the cipher, and they released it to the public on December 11th, 2020. Now, here's what the message said. I hope you are I hope you are having lots of fun and trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. Which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to the paradise all that sooner, because I now have enough slaves to work for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise. So they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise, death. Now, what they think that the intended message was supposed to say on the last couple of lines is, I'm not afraid because I know that my new life is death. Life will be an easy one in paradise. Now, the cipher did make the Zodiac that called the show look a little less like the Zodiac, because if you remember, he had asked that the prosecutors not ask for the death penalty if he had turned himself in. The cipher says that he's not afraid of the gas chamber because that'll make him go to his paradise that much sooner. So...
Well, yeah, but I mean, it could be that guy saying that to throw them off.
Could be. Now, again, going back to the talk show, Belli tried to calm the caller down by saying, quote, you're not going to be hurt if you talk to me. And then Dunbar said, quote, you're not going to the gas chamber. For some reason, the actual Zodiac didn't like that much because he stated, quote, that wasn't me on the TV show, while using a lot of the same language as the 408 ciphers. So the Zodiac was saying that the caller was an imposter. Now, Zodiac will call Eric an imposter again in his cryptogram in 1971 when he said that Eric and Carl Francis Werner, who was convicted of the two murders, were phonies by saying, quote, stop listening to phonies. And he was saying this because of the TV show and because the police were listening to them regarding the Kathy Snoozy and Deborah Furlong murders that happened on August 3rd, 1969. But the Zodiac said on November 8th he had committed the murders. Because both of the 340 cipher and the 148 character cipher mentioned Eric, it was definitely the same person. Now remember that the 340 cipher hasn't been solved yet when the 148 character cipher was made and sent to the San Francisco Chronicle.
So is it possible, which I guess anything is possible at this point, but it's kind of making me feel like maybe there's more than one person involved. And that maybe they're kind of using this Eric dude as a patsy. Maybe he's mentally unstable and he's being manipulated into pretending to publicly be this guy.
Well, I mean, I kind of understand where he's coming from there, but actually the letters and stuff they're getting, they're upset because Eric's a phony. So that's why they're trying to call him out, saying that Eric isn't the one doing it.
Well, yeah, I get that, but what I'm saying is, you know, is it possible that he's using that, like he's using Eric as a patsy, and that's his way of saying, like, hey, that's not the actual killer. Even though you have all this evidence that he's the one doing this and doing that, he's not the actual killer.
The Eric's not the actual killer, or
the Eric's not the actual killer.
Right.
So maybe he doesn't want credit for the reaching out and doing all the notes and all that shit, but he wants credit for the murders. Does that make sense?
Yeah, possibly. Kind of.
Do you see what does that make,
Yeah, I mean,
does it make sense what I'm saying? Well, it's kind of like and again, the best way I know how to reference things is through like movie examples, so I'm going to reference, like Saw.
Okay.
For example, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, also it's not sponsored. Not saying that for any reason other than to associate it, but in the first Saw or whatever, or actually most of the Saws, he always has an assistant who's the one bringing in the victims, who's the one doing all this stuff.
Right.
Even though in the background, Jigsaw is the one, again, spoiler alert, the one doing the killing or whatever, he doesn't actually bring the victims in or do anything associated with the victims themselves. All he does is set up the scenes.
Okay. Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so you're saying that Eric is doing the writings, the letters, the ciphers, that kind of stuff.
Right.
The Zodiac is only responsible for the actual deaths.
Correct. And he wants to make sure that he's getting the credit where he's supposed to be getting the credit.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I
because
understand a little bit more now.
Yeah, because even though Jigsaw would want that guy to do all the work or whatever, he definitely didn't ever want any of his assistants to be credited for the actual killing.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
But he's the face, they're the face that he wanted the victims to see and know.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Makes sense. Yeah. It's very, very possible.
I don't know. I know that was a little out on a limb and a little far-fetched, but.
Hey, I mean, you just don't know. I mean, it hasn't been solved, so, I mean, it's very possible there could have been more than one person involved. I guess.
Oh, it's just, or maybe they were working together from the beginning and then they had like a falling out or a tiff and now they're battling over credit for who did what.
Yeah, that could very well be a good possibility as well. Yeah. Definitely an interesting way to look at it. For sure. Okay, so, let's see, where did I go?
You were on this part, right?
Okay. They think that an article in the San Francisco Chronicle by Paul Avery on October 25th, 1969 could have been the reason for his choice of the dripping pen card. Now, if you haven't seen it, it shows a pen hanging by a thread with what looks like blood dripping from the point and had the saying, quote, "Sorry, I haven't written, but I just washed my pen," on November 8th. Now, the article says, quote, "Zodiac struck last on October 11th when he gunned down cab driver Paul Stein on Washington Street in Presidio Heights. He revealed himself the killer in a letter sent to the Chronicle 3 days later. Since then, he has remained silent." And if you remember in part 2 when we talked about the Lake Berryessa attack, and we mentioned how the Zodiac didn't send anything after the attack, talking about how he was the one that had committed the attack like the others. And also remember there was a phone call and the writing on the car, but nothing after the attack was ever sent or said by the Zodiac. Now in the Stein letter and the dripping pen card, he kind of takes credit for the attack by the words he wrote in the letter that said, quote, "I'm the same man that did in the people in the Northern Bay Area." They also say that if the Zodiac didn't have any involvement in the Berryessa attack, then the last part of the letter should have read the Vallejo area. So, now let's talk about the 148 cipher. So, we talked a little bit about the murder of Deborah Furlong, who was 14, and Kathy Snoozy, who was 15. I'm not going to go into much detail about the murders, as they were committed by someone else, who we'll talk a little bit about. Again, I won't go into much detail because I plan to do an episode on that as well. Now, Deborah Furlong and Kathy Snoozy were both found stabbed to death on August 3rd, 1969 in the Bay Area. On Sunday, April 11th, 1971, the body of Kathy Bielik, who was 18, was found close to a small stream. She had also been stabbed to death. Now, remember that the Zodiac had called Carl Werner a phony because the Zodiac had said he was the one to commit the murders of Deborah Furlong and Kathy Snoozy. Now, Carl was arrested on April 29th, 1971 for those murders, and the Zodiac was not happy about that at all. So at some point in time in the month of May, he sent the 148 cipher and a letter that read, quote, I do it because I done it 21 times. I can't stop because each that I kill makes it worse and I must kill more. Man is the most prized game. I'll never give my name because you don't understand. Next time I will send a patch of human skin if there is some left over. The 148 was cracked. A content warning here, there is mention of child harm. And it reads as quote, "'Tis the Zodiac speaking. Why can't you stop me? I can't stop killing. Stop listening to phonies. If this is not on your front page in a week, I will skin 3 little kids and make a suit from the skin." So that right there was the part I was saying, you know, it's like, why can't you stop me? It's like, you know, he does kind of
Want to be caught.
Right. Now, for some reason, the Zodiac really wanted the police to believe that he was the one responsible for the murders, and he was telling them not to believe any type of confession from Carl Warner. Now, until now, the Zodiac only mentioned that he was responsible for Deborah Furlong and Kathy Snoozy's death, but now he is claiming that he is also responsible for Kathy Bielek's death as well. Now, Kathy Bielek would be mentioned again by the Zodiac in the Monticello card on July 13th, 1971. I was unable to find exactly what the card said or what it looked like because apparently it was too graphic to release to the public. So I couldn't find it nowhere. Now, but the Zodiac sent the card, and some of the words on that card are, quote, I killed Kathy Bielek near Monticello in the villa. Hopefully I say this correctly, Montelago, Woods in April. The card also stated, quote, shot victims 21. Now again, Carl Warner was arrested and convicted of those crimes because there was just too much evidence against him and the fact that he had confessed, and there is not enough evidence to support the fact that it was the Zodiac. So here's where I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up, I think. I know there is so much more to do with Zodiac. There are many more letters, postcards, potential suspects, and I believe 2 more ciphers as well. There are also some other murders that could be linked to him as well, but with there being so much on this case, I think it is best to stick to the 5 deaths that are in fact connected to him. But if you do want to know more, you want to read the other information that's out there, again, one of the sites that I've used is zodiacciphers.com. There are links upon links on that site that will give you the information that you're looking for. There's also police reports and some autopsies on the site as well, so it goes in deep. Now, I definitely want to give a big thank you and a huge shout out to the person that made this site, Richard Grinnell, out of the Coventry, England. He's done so much great research as well. I mean, he did phenomenal on that site. So if you want to know more, head on over there. Check it out. So.
All right. Well, there was definitely a lot more things out in the world Zodiac related than I was aware existed, which is insane because you'd almost look at all the facts and think, how is it possible that they haven't identified who this person was?
Yeah, especially with the technology that they have now. But I mean, I know they got the bloody fingerprint. I mean, like I said, I didn't go into all of it. You know, I might go ahead and look into some more of it just for my own
knowledge, yeah.
To see if maybe they ever got any kind of DNA sample or, you know, anything that they have, you know, just anything.
Yeah, it's just crazy because, like I said, this dude, you know, he so many times puts himself in a position to easily be caught.
Yeah.
It's like he wasn't even trying to hide. He just was telling them, like, hey, this is what I'm about to do. Stop me.
Yep.
And they never did.
No, never did.
That's crazy.
Yeah. 1969 all the way until now.
Extremely interesting case. I might actually go look into the rest of that myself now that I know there's so much information out there.
Yeah.
I've got my brain working now, and I'm thinking of all these different roads that it could go down as far as, I said when you were reading it, was there more than one person involved?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, it's like I said,
it's a rabbit hole for sure.
I didn't even think about the possibility that there could be more than one person. I mean, it would make a lot of sense that there could be more than one person.
Yeah.
But like I said, I don't know. It's definitely crazy. It's sad all the way around. I wish at some point in time that he would be caught.
Yeah.
But
hopefully with the technology and stuff they have out available today, they can, look a little more into it and run some tests and come back with something.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal that from you.
No, that's funny. I just thought it was funny that we both said it. So I was like, hey. Yeah.
Also, sorry I was eating during that case. Wasn't trying to be rude. I was feeling a little peckish.
You're never rude.
I was feeling peckish.
Say your cookie thing. Cookie blanket.
Cookies and milk. Can you see my milk? Don't say that on camera.
Well, you're pointing to your milk. See the little milkies?
Yeah. One on each shoulder. I'm shouldering my milk.
Oh, that's great.
Anywho's, thank you for spending time with us today.
Yeah, we greatly appreciate it. Hopefully we'll see you again.
And thank you to all of our listeners, all of our supporters, all of our hopefully future supporters and listeners. And like we've said before, we know how valuable time is. So thank you so much for spending it with us today.
Yes, thank you.
All right. This is
Render the Darkness. Bye.